Hello, everyone. My name is Zeph, and welcome to the Star Network podcast. Today, we have with us as special guest Tushar, who is the founder and creative director of 1616 and Tai Tai. Hello, Tushar. How are you today?
Hello. Hi. I'm doing really great. It's so nice to be here,
I
actually.
know.
And I feel really honored that you selected me to be part of this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Can you please tell us more about 1616? What is it? What is the genesis behind the brand?
Sure. 16 by 16.
Yes.
And it's actually, the name's quite simple. It's plot 16 and flat 16 on that plot, and so really, like, the name is the place, and then the name takes you to the place. And I think the genesis of the brand was, I guess, from a very like top down approach. What happens when you put a bunch of people, let's say creatives, I wouldn't even say creatives, just people in a space, and you tell them that the space is theirs? What do they do with it, And I think that there's been, historically, that's kind of what humans do, They're given space, they're on land, for example, and then they make from it. And so mine's kind of a creative perspective on that. And so ultimately what it is about curating the best, the not so best, the what we have of the moment, I guess. And so in essence, I guess a more, grounded understanding of what 16 by 16 is it's a space for creativity to roam free. It's a space for artists, for thinkers, for doers. It's a place for connections and building your network and growing up. And it's also a place for love and care.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. No, I love that, Tushar. And I mean, I would definitely say 16 by 16 is one of my favorite brands.
Thank you.
No bias in interviewing you, but I feel a lot of young people can align with that statement. It's definitely a hidden gem. I love what you said about the basis is really just, it's, as you said, flat 16 at plot 16, Kofa Bayomi. And I remember when I came to know the brand in 2015, when I moved back and I said, I need to visit this place. It's multifunctional. As one, I knew it as come to 1616 if you want to have a pop-up, if you want to have an art exhibition.
Exactly.
And now you've evolved into boutique hotel hospitality. And even under the 16 by 16 brand, there's Tai Tai, which I absolutely love. How do you navigate managing all these businesses?
I guess some like timelines, just to sort of give you an idea. I think in the beginning it was 16 was just meant to be a guest house. It was just meant to welcome like the traveler in, and that was it. But I had an issue with that remit because I think in the early days, it was a very kind of like bland expat businessman walking in, and, he didn't really want to explore what Lagos had to offer. And I had just come back, and the creative scene was thriving, and I was having conversations with people, and we were like, yeah, what about us? What are we going to do, And so I had this living room in this apartment that was open. And it was just about having conversations with friends and saying, okay, let's play house, like, when you're younger and you do it. And so this was like the real world application of it. And so we put on some pop-ups. I was a bartender at the time, and so I was doing drinks. Drinks are like the best way to connect, I think, with people, right? Like nothing like a little alcohol, just to, and so it was just about figuring out what formats could mix with this bar, So we did food pop-ups, beauty pop-ups, and then we started doing art exhibitions, actually. Our mutual friend Gemma Broad, her and I went to an exhibition at another creative space. And it was really important we went to that space because there's been a long tradition of alternative arts in Lagos, in Nigeria. And obviously, by the fact of the nature that they're alternative, they're not very seen. And so it was really exciting to see this kind of work being produced, and me recognizing that oh, there's a need
this,
to for artists, young artists, creatives to have a space. And so I was like, okay, well, this is the space, you know. And so since then, it's just been rolling, you know. So we don't only I've only worked with artists, I've worked with cartographers, I've worked with NGOs, I've worked with energy companies, and in very different ways. I mean, one of our projects took us to Ibadan, and we were doing packaging for a seed yam company.
Oh, wow.
And so they were kind of genetically modifying these seeds to improve yields, because obviously like Nigeria is one of the largest producers of yam and consumers, but like the agricultural value chain it's a little bit broken, given obviously I'd say lack of good governance, most, you know, all that stuff. And so I found myself at very interesting crossroads all the time, and it was creativity that took me there.
You've touched on very critical things, and I think that's the beauty about the 16 by 16 brand, is that it could evolve to anything. And I think the beauty about it is how you've been able to utilize space to show creative work, especially artists that people hadn't necessarily heard about. You mentioned Yadi Chima. I remember knowing about her when I moved back in 2015. Her art, her work, it's very different. It's not like your traditional artwork. This is a space where you can come and find innovation. I like how people can go there and hide from the noise of Lagos. It's a hidden gem. I like to think of 16 by 16 and Taita almost like this modern day speakeasy vibe.
Exactly.
Because when you drive into the building, first you just see like a block of flats and you're like, wait, is there actually something here? You knock on the door and you're literally in an oasis. You said something which was very important. You said, growing up, you're a very sensitive kid. And for me, I always like the theory of nature versus nurture. And I wanted to say, do you feel growing up in Lagos, as you've mentioned, even to our audience, Tushar and I actually went to primary school together. And I remember you in primary school, we were friends, and then you disappeared. And then we both moved back in 2015. I find you again randomly. I think we're at RSVP or something. And I was like, Tushar! And we both started screaming. And I was like, oh my God, you do 16 by 16. But do you feel that, you know, that childhood memory of growing up in Lagos has sort of created an impact to you being who you are today to have these creative ideas? Or do you think it's something that's just more innate?
I think it's both of them, right? Because you can't separate a man or a human from their place. And I guess for me, ultimately, the question is often asked, like, how are you in Nigeria? Like, what are you doing here? And people are very like surprised to learn that actually I grew up here. I'm like the third generation to have lived here. There's a fair number of us as well. But I guess for me, I've been very intuitive about how I explore the space. So ultimately growing up here, it was I lived in a really insular environment. I mean, it was sort of compound life, and you know, and I guess I wasn't necessarily exploring. You know, you'd have your tutors come home and you'd learn piano and that kind of stuff. But I never really like went over to like friends' houses that much. I remember I think once I stayed over at a friend's place, and it was so jarring for me because I guess I'm not necessarily sure why, but that's just sort of how I grew up. But then when I came back and when we met, that was actually the beginning of
your new identity.
My new identity and sort of my real desire to understand Lagos and the place I was in. And so I think everything I've built has been in the last 8 or 9 years. But again, it's because I've been like, it's been like, okay, you're here, right? What are you gonna do? And I think that everything I do is partly Lagos's identity showing itself through me as well. I mean, I'd say I'm a curator, right? So I'm just sort of like picking and selecting the things that I understand, but also I guess people who are truly like responding to their environment as well. And so I guess it's both, you know. I think growing up or living in Lagos, the city is always going to impose itself on you, 100%. You know. I use this word often. I call it Lagos assemblage. And assemblage is like when you kind of just put things on top of each other, and then you're looking for like a visual imagery. And I call it everything I do Lagos assemblage, because if you're running a restaurant, you're running a hotel, you're curating an exhibition, there's going to be an element of Lagos that's going to show through, right? Like maybe the lights will go off, or someone will be stuck in the elevator,
or like just traffic,
so people will arrive late, you know, or like even the work itself, like your framer there's something, you know, and so the city has an impact, and an influence. For me, it's been about showing it more than hiding it. There's this tendency
to hide it. I agree with you, and I think that's why I 100% love every single thing that you curate your ideas. And I said it's not a biased thing; it's just factual. And I'm someone that's very big on impact, especially in terms of your environment. And when I see young people have amazing ideas and they try to tailor it to the needs of the people in that area, I think it's very critical. I think it can scale. I think you're addressing a need. So you coming back and saying the creative space in Lagos is doing really well. There's a boom. People are into art. People are trying to be innovative. But that innovation goes back to our cultural roots. And you being intentional to even learn about it. Like you said, you're third generation of living here in Lagos, Nigeria. But I think for me, people never really touch on running a business as a family, right? So people know you as the face behind 16 by 16, but really it's a family business. I know many times when I've gone to Tai Tai and I see your mom, I'm like, hi, auntie, do you remember me? She's like, yes. I don't really know whether she remembers, but she's like, yes, I do. It's just phenomenal to see, your mom is there trying to make sure that everything is done really well. Just your sister, sometimes I see her come in and out. And when I see things like that, I'm in awe, because you completely understand, your family understands the need for customer service, which is something that generally needs a huge improvement in Lagos as a whole. But what is that like, running a business with your family? Like, how do you manage the emotional and professional aspect?
So I think the answer to that is it's a lot of therapy. I think it's really hard running a family business. I mean, but family businesses are, in essence, the oldest type of business, right? Like, ultimately, it's this form of dependency. And we're a really cute unit. It's 4 of us, and we realized quite quickly that we need to secure our lives. And each of us has a very different vibe, a very different function. And I think a business is a really fantastic way to understand that, So I think the first thing is understanding that everyone has strengths and weaknesses. It's easier said than done. I think within my family, I'm the last to have learned this lesson. Actually, everyone else learned it before I did. Because I'm very particular. I'm quite a perfectionist about how things look and feel. But ultimately, it's about understanding that it's love and care, and we're a unit and we're supporting each other. I think my mum said this to me just yesterday, that in the end it's only love, that family is really all you have sometimes. Though I'm very lucky to have been able to build a Lagos family for myself. This was my first, my original. And so I think trials and tribulations always there, 100%. But I guess it's about learning how to separate it. I mean, speaking practically, I think there needs to be agreements, for example. Like, you can't have an informal agreement where, you do this, I do this.
There has to be structure and
clarity.
And
roles and clarity. I cannot stress it enough. And often, obviously, like, you can't have all of that, but it's to continue to drill it in. I mean, at the moment now, we have a very kind of clean system. I used to be fairly heavily involved in Tai Tai. I mean, maybe during COVID, sometimes you might have had me pick up the phone or respond to you. But now it's basically my mum and my sister and my dad running Tai Tai, and I've kind of gone off with 16 by 16.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, my major requirement is space and time to think. And I'm quite a control freak as well, which they know. They've learned.
So they kind of just give you
they're
your
like,
space.
yeah, I get my space. It's just this balance,
I like that. So it's essentially just doing that. Family really is about love. But at the same time, it is a business. I love what you said. And I'll emphasize that you said family business is the oldest type of business. And that is true. But I think for me, that comment about structure and ensuring that there are still frameworks in place that, yes, although it's all love, to ensure that the business is sustainable, you're picking up on each and everyone's strengths. So this is the structure. This person is in charge of this. This person is in charge of that. That's amazing. I think our audience would definitely learn from that. You mentioned COVID, and I want to talk about that because I feel during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of businesses suffered. But how were you able to sort of withstand that global challenge? And what advice would you give to other businesses within the hospitality space? I mean, Thai for me at that time was my go-to for ordering food. I feel like just food delivery services really picked up at that time.
Yeah.
So how were you able to navigate that during that?
So I guess the first thing is a lot of businesses suffered during COVID, but actually it was an opportunity for so many 100%. Other businesses. I think COVID changed a lot. All of a sudden you had all this extra time to think. And there's something really beautiful when humans don't do anything. And I think ultimately that's kind of what we're programmed to. We're not meant to do so much. Like there's too much flow right now, and I'm not saying I have an issue with that, because I guess that's what makes the world move. But I think it's important to interrogate this kind of idea of what makes the world move. I guess to come back to your question about how COVID was and how we could pivot, we were very blessed to have both a restaurant and a hotel. Obviously, the hotel suffered in that period because no one could come in. Though we did have a couple of people stay with us. The pivot to delivery was natural because it was always there. And again, it was a need, right? So we listened. And I think very quickly it was also about understanding we didn't want to let go of any of our staff. So very quickly, waiters became cooks, Very quickly, we were like, okay, now's the chance to really like solidify this family that we have, extend our ethos to them. So we'd go on runs, for example. We'd have movie nights. We were like it was a really lovely... Close-knit family.
Yes.
And then the delivery made sense because I think very quickly it was my mum, my sister, and me on the phones. Yes. And I said that we need to bulk up our customer service. We need to be the ones that are there. And I think that was a really big game changer. Because we then understood what it would take to teach it to other people. So the reason Thai has really great customer service is because COVID gave us an opportunity to rejig it,
and grow that. And it's funny you talk about customer service, because I was going to say, every time that I've personally gone to Thai, the customer service has been spot on. Whether I'm sitting at home, I'm placing an order, I'm there physically in the restaurant. So what advice can you give to, I mean, I don't really know whether it's advice because other restaurants will be hearing, but I think also just people who want to really go into the space to just improve on customer service is such a huge challenge. It still bugs my mind that it's still problematic today, although there are new developments and restaurants, etc., that sort of get it. That cultural undertone of customer service with people in that space is just not there. So I love what you're saying about you made your employees actually feel like family during COVID. That's critical. I think that's very necessary to make someone buy into your vision. They're not just a staff, but they are part of this business, and it's almost like that family, and that's how they ensure that the integrity of that business stands. But what will you say you do differently, or what advice would you give to sort of change the narrative of customer service in hospitality? Or in anything, really?
So I think the sort of base layer is really taking care of your employees. And I think that this is something that Lagos hospitality needs to learn better about. I mean, if minimum wage is 30K a month, everyone knows it's impossible to survive on that. So let's sort of, even barring that as an idea, the industry needs to have its own standard for what makes sense. You know, in hospitality, you're often working long hours and you're sort of serving people. It's people facing. So if someone's coming from really far away, they're sweaty, they don't have a place to live. You know, it's sort of all these effects compound.
Yeah.
So I'd say first, it's like if you're in hospitality, you take care of the team that's taking care of others.
100%.
You know, I think that's just the key thing.
Yeah.
And then I also think it's about being really present there for a really long time, because you need to go through the gamut of roles that are possible, right? Like you need to be a waiter, you need to be in the kitchen, you need to be checking people in. You have to go through all of those, and you have to have an idea of what you want to give the customer,
Correct.
right? I mean, I've always been obsessed with this stuff, right? Because ultimately, fine, we can build 4 walls, you know, and we can design it, but true experience comes when it's a people thing.
Element.
A lot of people fail to understand that. I wouldn't say fail to understand that, but a lot of people don't stress that more.
Enough,
you know, you can go to a restaurant and the value is in the wait staff knowing what food they're eating. And obviously that comes with a challenge, because we're Thai restaurants in Nigeria. I mean, in general, the waiters are not eating that
Thai food.
Like,
Exactly.
they don't, I mean, they like it.
Yeah, but it's
like,
not a norm for everyone.
Yeah, because everybody's going to go, like, they're going to eat
Nigerian
swallow,
food.
exactly,
Correct.
jollof,
Yes.
whatever it is.
Correct.
Like,
Yes.
that's what they're eating.
Yes.
And so again, it's a question of like, it ultimately goes back to like development, right? So it's like, if Nigeria was allowed to develop unfettered, sans colonialism, sans whatever, what would restaurants look like and eateries look like? You know, chances are there would have been it would have been Nigerian food still, because the place is still very much tied to its food culture, right?
Exactly.
And I think that that's the case in general. So I think when you're bringing in a new cuisine, that training element needs to be there in general, you know, and that thing like, oh, please taste the food, you know, like, let me know what you think. Let's have a conversation about it. It's sort of, again, going back to that creative thinking. There's so many artists that use food as a medium now, you know, food as a placemaking tool. And food can be such an incredible conversation around memory and history. I think it's important to have
healing.
And healing. Exactly.
No, I love that. I love what you said about the most important thing around customer service is ensuring that your staff, you take care of them. And that's something like I can't overemphasize enough, especially with just, you know, the economy as a whole. How do you actually get people that work for you to feel a part of your family, to feel like they buy into the vision, and that element of just whether it's financial or whether it's even just mental support, like, oh, what's going on at home? How can I help? Just these little things make a difference to customer care. But I love what you said about when you have staff and they are serving in a different cuisine like Thai food, that is not the cultural, traditional norm of what an everyday Nigerian person will eat. However, there is a demand and need for that diversity. There's nothing like going into a restaurant and you ask the waiter, why should I select this option on the food? Or if I pick this wine, what is the taste in this wine? Is it full-bodied? Is it medium? You know, and when they can actually respond back coherently, they understand it. I think that is actually what sets businesses apart, because it shows that that business owner has fully invested into that stuff beyond just your waiter serve people, but getting them to understand the food, the taste, the different buds, and you're doing it really well. Like, I'm super excited.
Thank you.
Last thing, what is the one thing you're most excited about right now? Whether in Thai or 16 by 16, it could be a new initiative that you want the audience to know. What are you most excited about?
So what we're doing with 16 by 16 is a lot of like consolidation work at the moment. So obviously we're a place that you can come stay in. We have a creative incubator, and we like to sort of work with artists, especially like sound artists. We're running a number of residencies now. The space is sort of quite alive again. But we have a maker space actually in Lagos Island, and that's been born of the tradition that we want to make sure that everything in the space is not imported. So the furniture in there is made by us. We're trying
you
to
make furniture.
Yeah.
That's actually exciting. You should emphasize that. So is it a separate entity of?
It's called Design Lab. It's under the 16 umbrella in general. I mean, in essence, all these ideas keep spudding, you know. So what we have is a carpentry workshop, a plastic maker space where we're currently doing rug making workshops, tufting with more rugs. I don't know if you know her.
Yes, I do. I've heard of that.
Yeah. So it's a space for people who can come in. We've been making some really lovely lights that we'll be launching in October during Design Week Lagos. And they're made out of recycled pure water bags, actually. What? So we're thinking about how to sort of, I guess, take things off the streets. And then we have a fermentation lab, which ultimately I hope we can make some wine and kombucha and some yogurt.
Tushar, that's incredible. You and I earlier spoke about giving back and impact and why that's very critical. And I like how you're able to look at the environment and say, there is a need here. There's still a lot of waste. There's a lot of dump in our environment. But how can I actually bring in recycling into my business? And that feeds into like creative development. What is your favorite quote and why? I ask every guest.
Yeah, sure. Something I wanted to highlight earlier, I think, in terms of, I guess, helpful tools that people who are interested in the space are. I said it's about sort of looking around. It's a 3-step system I use. It's listen, curate, and archive. And so it's really important to listen. And then obviously once you listen, you take your time with it. You pick what it is you want to highlight and then archive it. And archiving it could be anything, right? It could be a memory of it that you sort of have a mental note of. I really like to make notes. I use this really awesome tool called Arena, which is so fantastic. It's a lot of artists and researchers use it as I guess an archive. And so I've been.
Where can people find Arena?
It's are.na. Yeah, really amazing tool, I think. For a lot of creative thinking. But I've been developing this board. It's called What Are We Building, really? And I always like to ask myself that question, you know, like, what is it you're doing? And so I picked this from that board. It's a quote by David White. Do you know the On Being podcast by Krista Tippett? It's amazing. It's around like spirituality, the environment, philosophy. So it goes like this. The ability to ask beautiful questions, often in very unbeautiful moments, is one of the great disciplines of a human life. And a beautiful question starts to shape your identity as much by asking it as it does by having it answered. And you don't have to do anything about it. You just have to keep asking. And before you know it, you will find yourself actually shaping a different life, meeting different people, finding conversations that are leading you in those directions that you wouldn't even have seen before.
Amazing. No, that's really amazing. Can you shed more light in terms of what that means to you?
I guess you can live a life sometimes where you don't know what you're doing, you know, 100%. But you can be in like a new environment. And I guess just by the nature of you being there and asking like, what am I doing here? I think you're already sort of pointing yourself in a direction. I would call myself a Nigerian, but definitely there's Indian elements in me. I mean, I'm Indian. And personally, I lead a lot with this idea of doubt, that I don't know something. And I express it a lot, you know. I'm very quick to apologize when I've done something wrong, maybe almost too quick, and that could come down a bit. But this idea that you don't know, if you lead with that,
it opens up more opportunities.
It opens up more, exactly. You know, it's
100%.
like,
no, you're right. And I think I actually agree with your point of, you know, the sense of the Nigerian pride in terms of like, oh, this is what I'm doing, I know it, etc. But there's actually beauty in the unknown, or saying, oh, I don't know something. It opens up your mind to want to explore more things. It opens up just opportunity. And I think this is actually something that I've been learning in the past year. Like, what are the things I don't know? And how can I use that as a sense of development? So even if it's in researching, so for instance, I've started to want to listen to more things about like neuroscience. I'm not a scientist. I don't have an interest in being a doctor or anything, but I'm very curious about just how the mind works and having more questions about it and asking people. And I think you saying that is who you are as a person and your identity has allowed you to be very innovative. It has allowed you to bring diversity to the different things that you want to do. And I think our audience has learned so much from this. Before we go, guys, thank you so much for joining in our podcast. Please follow us at the Sound Network Pod for questions, any single thing you want to ask about. For partnerships, our email address is in the bio. If you want to learn more about 16 by 16 and the great work Tushar is doing at Taita as well, follow him. Tushar, where can the audience find you?
So you can check 16 by 16 out on Instagram. We're at 16by16. We also have a website. I mean, pretty much the information's there, but we're always open, open channels of communication. Super important. So yeah, just reach out, say hi.
Awesome. Thank you guys, and see you next time. Bye.